Thanks. I'm going to try to do it without the mic. Can everybody hear me? Yep. Okay, great. Well, thanks, you guys. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So what I'm going to do is just really quickly run you through kind of an overview of Save Historic St. Andrews, kind of as an organization of neighbors, how it all started, how we got together, and then give you an update of everything we've been doing and kind of what's worked, what hasn't worked, and where we are now. And then end up by talking about what you guys can do to get involved if you so choose, kind of next steps. And then we're gonna get a little bit deeper into the history of things. So we're going to talk again about the organization, why we care, how we got here, why all the neighbors came together underneath the banner of Save Historic St. Andrews to oppose the current TCGIS plan, what we've done, what we're asking the school to do, and then how, like I said, how you can help if you so choose. So, who are we? Save Historic St. Andrews is really a group of friends, neighbors, people who are concerned about St. Paul history and architecture, who banded together to save what we consider to be an iconic historic place in the neighborhood, and that is the former St. Andrews Church, or the Ala, as it's referred to. A lot of our members, they live here, they work here, they teach, preach, learn, worship, or they play in the Warrendale neighborhood. My connection is my wife used to go to school at St. Andrews, and her picture's up there somewhere, but I promised her I would not point her out. But her teacher is here too. Yeah. So we do have connections, but we also have people that are involved who just love St. Paul history and the architecture, and just love to visit the Warrendale area. Quite frankly, no one really imagined that the Ala or St. Andrews would ever be threatened with demolition, and most of us who were involved in this first learned about this in March of 2018, so just a few months ago, really. We were shocked at first, but we all came together, we organized, and really, SHSA, if you want to call us that, it's a little cleaner than Historic St. Andrews. We came together in April after the detailed land use committee meeting, and that's the one where they presented their plan kind of at large to the community. By the way, this is St. Andrews School. This is second grade. It's I want to say 30, 35, 36. So what do we want? What's our goal? The goal of our organization is simply to stop the demolition. We think that's kind of table stakes. We need to do that first. Stop the demolition of the Ala, or the St. Andrews, the former St. Andrews Church building. And then what we're really asking for is collaboration. We would really like to sit down at the table with TCGIS and talk about the plan and see if we can come up with a win-win solution that works for people who are concerned about what's happening there, and also we want something that works for the school. So why do we even care about this? I mean, what's the big deal? Some people are, maybe it's some people aren't as invested as we are, and it's maybe a little bit of a mystery. And first of all, we feel that history matters, and Warrendale in general respects its historic places. The St. Anthony Church building, well, St. Andrews rather, has been here for more than 100 years. 1895, I think, was when it was founded, and that building right across the street from us has been here for 91 years. So it's been here for a very long time. It's really been the heart of the community in many ways. And we know that it served just generations of people, whether they're students or immigrants or neighbors. So it really has felt like the heart of the community, like I said. And it just feels unimaginable or unthinkable to remove that from the Warrendale community. At least the members of Save Historic St. Andrews believe that. This is a brochure or bulletin from the very first graduation that took place at St. Andrews in 1928. Which is pretty cool. We also think community matters, and in a community that supports when people come together to communicate, collaborate, that's really important, and we think that needs to happen. And one of our first objections to the plans that was presented to us was that it was felt that we really weren't asked to participate in a lot of the early planning that went into it, or a lot of the early decision making. And we feel that the community as a whole probably has a lot that it can contribute to this, but we just need the opportunity to contribute. So that's one of the things we're asking. We also think engagement matters. I love the ties. Did you guys see these? These big, fat 1930s style ties. We think it's really important to engage. It's really important for the community to engage with the school, and it's really important for the school to engage with the neighbors and the like, and hopefully with, say, Historic St. Andrews. And we can hopefully come together around a goal, and that would be to save Historic St. Andrews and deliver on the needs that the school has, but also deliver on what we would hope for the community. But of course, all this comes down to actions. Actions matter. This is third grade, 1927. So TCGIS announced that they wanted to start the demolition as soon as tomorrow. That was posted on their website, what was called Selective Demolition. Now, we're not accusing the school of this, but in our experience, usually what that means is there's been some opposition or there's some concern about historic designation happening that could forestall a demolition, a full demolition, and so the goal then is to just take pieces off it to kind of convince people that the fight's over. We're not saying that's what the school is doing. We have seen that pattern before, so you can imagine our hair stood up on the back of our neck when we heard about this plan. But we have a little bit of good news potentially to report now, is that we met with representatives from the school this morning, and we talked about this. And I think that we've reached a tentative agreement right now that there will be no partial demolition, no selective demolition of the building. So we love that. There's still some details to figure out. And there's still the possibility of a full demolition of everything next June in 2019. But we think this is a step toward approving or getting trust, restoring trust. So how did we get here? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but in 2011 it all started when the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis were trying to raise money. Congregations were being merged, extra buildings were being leased or sold off in order to raise money, and St. Andrews was one of those. The French Immersion School was here for a while. St. Paul Public Schools had offices over at St. Andrews for a while, and they moved out. And then 2013 rolled around, and that's when the school bought the property. There was a conduit bond funding measure that had about $8.3 million in it to purchase the school. It included this, which we thought was interesting, which $2 million was set aside for what was called reconstruction or rehabilitation. And we think some of that was probably spent on adapting the aula space for use, which is good, but that's a lot of money. So we have questions about that, and I'll tell you more about that in a bit. Demolition of the rectory. I don't know if you guys remember the rectory, the building. Yeah, that was part of the plan. And so that building was taken down, was right away, and there's a parking lot there now. Demolition of the aula was not included in this plan. So people were happy to see St. Andrews being used, right? The building isn't sitting empty, there's another school there, that's great. And I think overall people welcomed the school, and just to acknowledge kind of one of the elephants in the room, there's always going to be concern that needs to get solved around parking and traffic and things like that. So that was always there. But we at Historic St. Andrews, there were a couple of yellow flags when we started looking at the plan and kind of how the plan was developed. And one of those yellow flags to us was that soon after they purchased the property, there were some strategic retreats and facility meetings and the like in which changes were being planned. They already started talking about what kind of changes or expansion could happen on the site. And this was curious to us because before this time, the property had been described as full of classic buildings, or buildings that to my ear sounds like these are things we should respect, which is great. And I'm sure the community heard that too. And so that was roughly 2014, 2015, in that neck of the woods is when talk of these changes started happening. And again, that's from school records. But of course, it was 2018, almost 4 years later, when most of the community learned of this. So that's almost a 4-year gap. So that was alarming to us. And the other thing that was alarming, and it's a really key thing, is we didn't feel like there was much meaningful participation from the community. And so, of course, when it came out, some people were caught by surprise, or maybe some people knew there was something going on, but they weren't the fact that they were talking about the complete demolition of the building was a surprise to some people. And we know this because we've talked to people, and that's what they've been telling us. And since that time, there have been opportunities to give feedback from the community, but we found that a lot of those are rather limited, and they seem to assume that demolition is a fait accompli, meaning it's kind of a done deal. It's like, we want community input on kind of what the outside of it looks like, what the siding is, what the green space is, things like that, but not about the big question, like, should you do this demo at all? That really hasn't been discussed very much. So opposition grew, the school became more entrenched in their plan, we got more and more active, we started protesting, and it started to escalate after that. So there have been accusations back and forth, and well, trust eroded further, and here we are. Somebody asked once, why did the Catholic Church, the diocese rather, divorce itself of St. Andrew's? Why did it sell the building? Why didn't they keep it? What's interesting is that there are plenty of people who think that they shouldn't have done that. This is a great quote where they said the Archdiocese foolishly let this one go. So I don't think that they necessarily did it by choice, and there certainly was an agreement to do this, but they felt that they had to. So when we talk about the plan,
I think I'd like to clarify in this statement that was made.
can we wait to the end, Julie, because we only have a few minutes.
We haven't been planning this for 40 years.
Well, planning is 30 minutes presentation.
Yeah, I want to get back to that because we have plenty to say about that. So the first thing I want to say is we don't like the plan, but that does not mean we don't like TCGIS. Just to be clear, we're not attacking the school. And just because we're against the plan does not mean we're attacking kids or their right to have a good education. That's not true either. We're focused on the plan. And I think it's really important that we separate these things. Because if there was a plan that the community and the school, everyone came together and felt it was a great thing, there wouldn't be an issue with having the school across the street at all. So why don't we like the plan? There are some kind of big picture reasons. One of which is we feel that it's essentially replacing something that we think is irreplaceable. And that is the structure of the St. Andrew Sanctuary of the Allah. The craftsmanship is great. And I know we've got some folks who are going to be talking about this in a little bit. We've interviewed people like some large commercial builders, and we've asked them about the structure and their assessment. And we asked them, well, what would it take to recreate this? And a very large experienced builder told us that, frankly, he couldn't because it would just be too difficult to find the people who have the skills necessary today to do this. And the craftsmanship would be very hard to duplicate. And I said, well, yeah, but let's assume you could find somebody that could do it. What do you think it would cost? And their answer was, well, this is a ballpark, it's not official, but I would say tens of millions to come close to that was their statement. And this is a builder that is active right now and is building like skyscrapers and big stuff. So they were pretty impressed by the quality of the structure itself. We also feel like the plan right now is not really putting a lot of value on the history, either of the building or of Warrendale. And maybe it might be unfair for us to throw this out there because the school as an entity, not the people in it, but the school as an entity is a relative newcomer to the community. It's been here for about 5 years. So it might be unfair for us to expect that they know all the community connections or how deep those roots go. So what we're just asking is that they're open to learning about that and understanding how deep those roots go. And then we hope that if we convince them, they would see themselves rather as a steward of our history instead of a threat to it. We also feel like the plan gives up on reuse, and we talked about that this morning a little bit. That some reuse, what's called adaptive reuse has been done. They've converted what was a church sanctuary into a gym space, and there's a cafeteria there. Adaptive reuse is a best practice for sustainability. We believe the current spaces can be modified creatively to meet their needs without destroying a community landmark. There are a lot of examples of this. This is the same space. Isn't this weird? That's what it looked like soon after it was built. You know, it's changed over the years, but this is the same space. And a couple of myths we want to break too. interior modifications of a building that's been locally designated or has been considered historically significant, interior modifications are okay if the thing isn't frozen in time when that happens. So we think that's really important to get out there. It's okay to get creative in this space. And as of this morning, when we met with the school, one of the things we offered was to enlist the help of a leading adaptive reuse architect to help plan and look at potential solutions for the space that wouldn't involve tearing down the building. We don't think demolition is green either. When we talk about sustainability and we're talking about planting rain gardens and adding green space and recycling aluminum cans and all of that stuff, it's really hard to take that at face value when we're talking about throwing away an entire building. When the National Trust says that building reuse almost always offers environmental savings over demolition and new construction. And this is the killer part. Let's say you build a new building and it's LEED certified, it's the best energy efficient building that you can build. Once you take into effect all the costs of demolition and new construction, it can take up to 80 years for a new energy efficient building to overcome the impact created by its construction. The carbon footprint created by what's being proposed is massive. And I think it's really important that we recognize that, and maybe eventually that we decide that we're okay with that. But it really bothers us to hear talk about green and building energy efficient buildings and and sustainability when we're about to do one of the worst things we can possibly do. And the biggest takeaway from all of this is the bottom line here, that the greenest building is the one that's already built. And there are studies after studies after studies. I can't take credit for that line, but. We also have found there are parts and pieces of the DTID plan that we think are in conflict with the current plan, and that is in the DTID plan it talks about preserving residential character and reusing existing structures. There are also planks within the housing, within the land use parts of the plan that talk about supporting citizen-led preservation activities, defining character-defining features of a neighborhood that should be preserved. I mean, that's one of the biggest character pieces of the neighborhood, I would say. And supporting the designation of historic resources such as buildings and preservation is all through the neighborhood plan, and we think we need to recognize that. It's also littered throughout the city plan. So this is the City of St. Paul plan. Historic preservation is a core community value. Preserving places that are closely tied to historic features of the city. You know, all these things are built into all of these civic and community plans. We feel like right now they're just getting good services, they're being ignored, and we don't think that's a smart thing. There are some estimates. There have been some talks about how much work and maintenance is required on the ALA facility itself, and we wanted to look a little more closely at that because maintenance costs is probably the number one rationale for demolishing an historic building. People say it just costs too much to maintain, and they can be expensive. You know, we get that. We're not finding that in the records that we're seeing. So this is, for example, this is an invoice that shows the annual maintenance. This is from a while ago. This is from 2000. The yearly maintenance on the roof was $576.52, and that was for an entire year. And this included replacing missing and broken tiles, reattaching loose tiles, reattaching flashing, and patching a gutter. So there was kind of a lot of work in there, and this is for a year. That was, $600. That would be expensive on my house, but for a building that size, it doesn't sound all that crazy to me. We know that there's talk that the ALA needs an expensive roof replacement, and we agree, replacing the roof, if you were going to do that, that's a big roof. And it's made with clay tiles, which are an expensive material. So yeah, we get that would be a lot of money. We heard the numbers from the school and the estimates that they were given by pros. We hired a pro too to go take a look at it, and they came up with a figure that was about $250,000 less than the estimates that the school had been given. And so just, I think this afternoon, we took this report over and gave it to the facilities director. So now they have this information of where that number came from.
Actually, State backs on that. Our quote was 500,000 to 750,000 as an estimate. And your estimate was 450,000 to 500,000. So
That's correct.
with that $500,000 mark, that's our two estimates from two different contractors match.
It's the low end that was.
Kevin,
You gotta compare high end to high end.
Yeah,
That's what
see,
this is.
that's the difference.
And you're right, your bottom end with a $250,000 range does agree with the top end of this one. But if you compare top end
So
to
we're
top
comparing
end,
two estimates.
That's kind of a detail.
They both overlap at $500,000. So
Exactly.
I would like to,
include tile
I would just like to state the facts.
Does
Can we
it
continue the presentation?
Yeah, and Julie, I do appreciate what you're saying. We'll get to this. We'll get to this, because there's a whole bunch of these kind of fuzzy numbers that we need to get to the bottom of. You know, one thing too was, we also saw a record of all the maintenance costs over a 12-year period. Now, this is before the school. Just to be clear, this is before TCJS was there. But over a 12-year period, about $16,800 went into the annual maintenance of the roof. And that was over a 12-year period. It's 12 years of maintenance was what was required. And we've been told time after time that tile roofs are designed to last forever, as long as they're well maintained. And from all estimates that we've seen and the experts that we've hired to go look at the building, and some of these with the blessing of the school, the all is considered to be the exterior in good condition. And in fact, there was some facilities assessment stuff from 2016 that the school released. And these are just numbers, and we're just sharing the numbers out of this report that's publicly available. You can go out there and find it on their website today. That roof maintenance had a line item for $10,000 for the year. Seems reasonable. The building envelope or siding repair budget was $1,000 for the year. The budget for brick repair, and that includes like the tuck pointing and replacing any broken brick, $1,500 a year. Snow removal was $4,000 a year. And so, but all the maintenance budget put together for all that we saw for the exterior envelope, and we talked about this morning, was less than the cost of the cleaning contract of the cleaning service for a year. So the takeaway for us was that these numbers don't sound like a big maintenance burden. And so when we hear people talk about how expensive it is to maintain the building, or that it's some sort of big money pit, from their own numbers that we're looking at, we just don't see evidence of that. And maybe there's stuff that we're not seeing, and that's why we're asking the school to kind of, let's open the lines of communication so that we can get more into that detail. There's also some concern that TCGIS may outgrow the site. And I know from this morning, they said that they targeted a growth cap, like a firm cap, they said, of 650. And I think that was by 2020, which is, we just wanted to put that out there. We also know that there has been conversation around expansion beyond the proposed amount of space there. So they would have to either buy up more properties and expand, which eats into the residential character of the neighborhood, or consider a split campus, which I know they're not keen on, or potentially a new home, which from this morning it sounds like they don't want to do either. So if they move, the consequences of some of these demo decisions, it won't matter to TCGS. If they grow so big that they need to move from the space after they've made all these changes and destroyed the all and done all these other things, it won't be their problem at that point, because they'll move on, whereas the neighborhood will have to live with the consequences. And that's pretty important to talk about. And then we're also worried about additionally compounding traffic and parking problems. So that was kind of the origin and kind of what's been going on, and kind of why we formed as a group. Some of the things that we've done, we've been pretty busy. I don't know, you may have seen us out front protesting, you may have seen the yard signs. We've spent thousands of hours researching, organizing, meeting, talking, learning, doing all sorts of crazy stuff. We've also found potential solutions that we've taken to the school for them to consider. They've looked at some of those. All of them have been rejected up to this point, but our plan is to keep pursuing a better plan. And just want to give you a sense of some of the things we've been doing. A lot of different activities, from going to a ton of meetings, doing a lot of outreach, writing op-eds, offering to host design charrettes and brainstorms, interviewing family and neighbors. We've gone to a whole ton of different research libraries and architectural centers, and we've researched the city ordinances, US, Minnesota, and state laws. We've reached out to council members, the mayor's office, city officers, talked to contractors and experts. We're working with various departments within the city, including safety and inspections, planning and economic development, the Heritage Preservation Commission. We've also synced up with other groups around the city that are like-minded, because we're all facing similar issues, just in different parts of the city. And so, one. That orange dot, right, this orange star, that is where the future St. Andrews will be built. It's not built yet in this photo. This is the St. Andrews Church/School in 1921. This is a bunch of folks with a big pile of bricks laying the cornerstone of that place. This is the building they built right there. See, it kind of looks like St. Andrews. These are the members of the Hungarian Benevolent Society. This is what the immigrants were doing when they arrived here. They came to Warrendale, they banded together, they formed these societies to help each other. This guy right there, his name's Frank. I went through all of his papers. This is his military passport from when he was in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He came over on a German liner. People started writing him letters, which I thought was kind of cool. This is him later when he was active at St. Andrews. And what's cool is that St. Andrews had a German component to it and a Hungarian component, and they used to trade nights at the church. There would be a German bazaar night, and then there'd be a Hungarian bazaar night, and they went back and forth. And Frank here was involved in both of those. And these are ribbons that were worn by some of the members of these benevolent societies that were active at St. Andrews. So there's a lot of history, a lot of connections to immigration, and it goes way, way back. So what we're asking essentially, in summary, is stop the demolition, collaborate with the community, let's talk about this. You don't need to be scared of preservation, because we've heard some fears like it'll tie our hands, we won't be able to do stuff with the building. Some of the stuff is not true. It does insert an extra review step with the Heritage Preservation Commission, but it doesn't stop new construction. It doesn't stop you from doing approved or needed demolitions. It doesn't stop respectful remodeling. And you can do stuff on the interior to your heart's desire. And the other thing, there was a fear that preserving the building would be bad for like resale. If they decided to sell this building and it was on the register locally designated, that'd be a bad thing. In fact, usually preservation can increase resale value, and property values go up faster in local preservation districts than outside of them. And this is true across the country, whether it's St. Paul or whether it's in Virginia. It is a matter of like, here's one in Virginia, 200% higher inside of historic preserved districts than outside. We're talking the market value. In St. Paul, historic Hills District, housing prices were going up 31%, where at this time in 2014, everywhere else in the city had a net drop of 18%. History brings value. Respecting historic property brings value to the whole neighborhood, and that's really important. So if you're interested in becoming involved with this, here's some ways that you can help. We have a fence of love out there, if you saw that, where people can put little locks and you can write notes if you'd like. And I think we have material here. If you want to do that tonight, you can do that. We would ask that you would help build trust between say Historic St. Andrews and the neighborhood in general, and anyone at the school. And we would encourage you to encourage the school themselves to collaborate with the community. And we would ask you to encourage your neighbors to have a positive outlook toward the school as well, so that we can create a good environment for collaboration. Talk to your city council reps, and then a couple of meetings coming up. There's a Heritage Preservation Commission public hearing about St. Andrews on November 1st. There's a Land Use Committee meeting on the 7th. And then there's a board meeting on the 20th. And frankly, we just, as Historic St. Andrews, just can't imagine this place without that building. So that's it. George, did you have?
The HPC is going to meet on November 5th in the City Council chamber.
Not November 1.
First.
Okay. November 5th is when that.
This is the only thing on the meeting.
Cool. Awesome.